Guys, very welcome back. In this video we'll cover about message characteristics. Okay, that is a characteristic in persuasion. We have already covered what are the source characteristics, right? So let's start with the message characteristics. The target is that persuader has to persuade the persuadee. The persuader has to change the orientation of the persuadee. He has to propagate the counter-attitudinal messages. Now, the degree of counter-attitudinal orientation by the source in the message is known as message discrepancy. Now, every human being has got three zones based on perception of the message discrepancy by the source. Here is the individual. First is the A, second is I, and third is R. A-I-R, air. Acceptance, zone of indifference, and zone of rejection. Okay? Depending upon the person's personality, if the person is educated, okay, his zone of acceptance increases. If the person is prejudiced, if the person is bigot, orthodox, if the person is uneducated, primarily, and it's very likely that his zone of acceptance would be very shrinked, and zone of rejection would be very high. Here we can see that how the aim of education is to expand the zone of acceptance of people. Once the zone of acceptance of people increases, they tend to be more tolerant, they tend to be more patient, they tend to accept multi-ethnicism, multiculturalism, secularism. The zone of acceptance is increased by great orators. Okay? By following the messages in zone of acceptance of these bigot people, these prejudiced people, we can increase the zone of acceptance. That's the aim of education. When the message falls in zone of acceptance, the discrepancy by the persuader in his message is perceived underestimated, and message is likely to be accepted. When the counter-attitudinal messages by the persuader, its discrepancy is perceived to be overestimated. It's overestimated by the persuadee, and the message is likely to be rejected. And when message is in zone of indifference, it's because the people are indecisive. They immediately want to go either side, as they can't stay in the dilemma for long. Next, we will see what are some of the points we can take while persuading someone, right? How should we frame the message? How should we convey the message? What should be the content in our message that will work in a better persuasion of the persuadee, right? So the first point is fear appeal. The next point is whether you should tell the sideness of the appeal message, whether one side, right? Whether the pros, or you should say the cons also, right? Next we'll see whether you should conclude the message. You should draw the conclusion in your message, right? Next, whether you should use emotional content in your message, or more of the factual parts, right? How can you use some of the pleasant form? How can you use distraction in the message so as to persuade the persuadee? Or what should be the channel factor in your message, and how deep you should involve the learner? Okay, how deep you should involve the persuadee? Okay, so that it can be a better persuasion, right? So let's start. First, let's start with the sideness of appeal of message. We'll come to the fear appeal at the last. Now, whether you should say the pros, the positive side of the message, or you should also say the cons. Okay, so the time, when you should say only one side. The time when the target group is not informed about the other side, then you can only say the one side of the message. When the target group agrees with the position held by the source, and the task of the source is to secure the further agreement, then only you should say only the one side of the message. And when the target group is not very intelligent and educated, need not to say other side, that only it's okay for only the one side of the message to go, right? Now when you gonna say the both sides of the message? When the target group are informed about the other side, okay, then you should say both the sides. And when the persuadee disagrees with the source's position, then you should say both the sides, pros and the cons. And moreover, when the position, when the task of the source is for the attitudinal change, and when the target group members are very intelligent and educated, okay, then you can say both the sides. Okay, just mentioning the other side is also there without mentioning the other side, okay, the points of other side, is many times convincing. Okay, I think we are quite clear with when we should say the both sides of the appeal message. Okay, now the next point is when we should draw the conclusion, whether we should draw the conclusion or let the target group draw the conclusion. Now there is a catch-22 situation. If you draw the conclusion, the target group will see you as a spreader of propaganda. If you don't draw the conclusion, there is a risk that the target group member won't draw the conclusion as you want them to draw the conclusion. Okay, now there are some of the points when to draw the conclusion. Okay, some of the situations where in the message you can draw the conclusion is when the message is not related to intense attitude of target group members. Okay, when the person is of a very, very narrow zone, okay, then better not to draw the conclusion. Okay, for example, when there is a matter of some religious issue, right, and it is related to intense attitude, need not to draw the conclusion. Okay, if it's not related to some secular issue is there, you can draw the conclusion. Secondly, when the message is abstract and complex, hard to understand, you can draw the conclusion. Okay, when the target group members are not very educated and intelligent, it's better to draw the conclusion. Okay, and target group members, when believe that drawing conclusion doesn't imply insult to their intelligence, it's better to draw the conclusion. The third is whether you should use more of emotional appeal or you should fill your message with the factual details. The best is judicious use of both, a mix of both the aspects in the message, but at times it has been seen that an emotional appeal is way, way better than a factual appeal. That's why politicians use emotional appeal in their message. Rahul Gandhi crying, Sonia Gandhi crying during the 2004 elections, during the 2009 elections, that a single woman is there and all the members are the men, right? So that's an emotional, this emotional appeal was generated in the favor of Sonia Gandhi. Okay, pleasant form of distraction. How can you use distraction in order to persuade? Now the thing is, when distractions are positive, right, these increases the reciprocity factor. For example, when there is a sweet offered with, okay, that's why many a times meetings and agreements are accompanied with a dinner, because when you are having something it's very hard to negate. Okay, so dinner meetings, gifts exchanges is a pleasant form of distraction. Okay, channel factor. So this tells you that if you want to persuade the persuadee, invite him to the dinner. If you want to persuade the persuadee before the agreement, give him big expensive gifts. Okay, the channel factor. Now you should choose the channel which is compatible with the characteristics of the message. Okay, for example, if the message requires lots of imagination, you can use a video, okay, so that the audience understands the message. A channel factor compatible with the characteristics of target group. Okay, if the target group is, for example, disabled, or if target group is the blind, the persuadee is the blind. So what persuader can use, he can use the required, he can use the voice message and not the video. Okay, so that's how the channel factor is important. If for example the characteristics of target group is they are not well educated, then the message could be like taking out nukkad nataks, as it is done in the village. Okay, so finally penultimately the participation of learner. It has been seen that when you actively participate the target group members asking questions, the message is better received rather than a passive participation. Okay, if it's a one-sided message, okay, then the target group members are less likely to receive the message. And finally we come to the fear appeal. Now it has been seen, if you use the mild fear, it is way better than strong fear. Okay, because strong fear, it leads to defensive avoidance. Moreover, many times it has been seen that strong fear leads to loss of hope and faith in the life of the person. Okay, what is defensive avoidance? Like if it's like a father and it's beating the child and telling the child, if you don't score this % of marks, you'll be thrown out of the home and you can't study for the whole of your life is destroyed. So this kind of it leads to defensive avoidance. The child may run away from the house. But if the fear is mild, okay, like if you don't score this particular amount of marks, you would we won't take you to the entertainment park, right? So in the name of entertainment, in the name of film, in the name of new video game, the child will work harder. Okay, so the hope and the faith in life is maintained in the mild fear. Now, sometimes strong fear is also needed, because when it poses threat to the loved ones, it is issued by the high credibility source. The target group members are not understanding the topic. The target group members with low perceived vulnerability to threat. Right? The effectiveness of fear appeal enhances when accompanied by suggestions. Okay, so you can give a mild fear along with the suggestion of what timetable you need to follow for the son. Okay, so fear and reward can be used interchangeably. Okay, so that's all. So we learned fear appeal, we learned sightness of appeal message, we learned drawing conclusion, and we learned whether to use emotional or factual measures. We also learned pleasant form of distraction, we learned channel factors importance, and we learned how important is participation of learner in persuasion. Okay, so that's all. Thank you.